Old followers of this channel may remember the articles and videos I posted when the Syria map was released a few years ago. Most information was provided by a friend living in Tel Aviv, AssafB, a friend from my time in the 132nd Virtual Wing. Assaf also hosted a few excellent presentations spanning from the history of modern Israel and the conflicts with its neighbour to a brilliant introduction to CAS control. This story began in June 2021. The never peaceful situation in those areas took a turn for the worse, and he told the story of the reality of living under the so-called Iron Dome. You can find such an article linked in the description below. A few years have passed and the events of the 7th of October changed many things. I invite everyone to read, listen or watch, depending on the media of your choice, until the very end. The situation discussed in this video is surely controversial. The message normally depicted is far too disconnected from the lives of common people living those realities. It is turned into a black versus white confrontation, and the blame game begins. But that is not the case here. Instead, I found Assaf's message quite universal and relatable to all those families unfortunately living through similar events. Because when bombs and rockets start falling, and you are running to a shelter with your children, politics are the last thing that matters. I started this thread some years back trying to describe how it feels like to be an ordinary civilian rather than a soldier or decision maker. A guy with a wife and a little kid living in a place that's occasionally on the receiving end of rockets coming from the Gaza Strip. Since then, everything has changed. We've lived through that Saturday, October 7th, which marked the beginning of another devastating war. That war brought with it emotions and experiences that are still hard to put into words, even nearly 2 years later. Given the thread's focus on rockets and shelters, I thought it was time to update and reflect on what's changed since my original post. As before, I'll do my very best to keep things factual, or at the very least, describe how and we perceive it from our own little corner and perspective. If there's any stench of politics, ethnicity, or other coming from this wall of text, then please do forgive me and believe me that it was unintentional. The early days, October 2023. October 7th and the days that followed saw a sharp increase in rocket attacks from Gaza. Our routine was the same as before: huddle in a safe corner of our apartment, wait 10 minutes, and move on. No, we never really get used to that experience. Even after many dozens of alerts, the tension and fear are always there. Rockets are statistical weapons. They are neither accurate nor efficient. And yet, we had a couple of impacts within 1 kilometre of our home, one in an open field, and the other a direct hit in an apartment building, which destroyed an apartment, but its occupants were in the shelter and safe. But this time, there was real fear that Hezbollah would join in from the north. Their arsenal included a lot of heavy rockets and suicide drones, both capable of reaching Tel Aviv. Our apartment's safe corner felt inadequate against these threats for an extended period. Homefront Command advised, if you can't reach a shelter in 90 seconds, go to the building's internal staircase and descend 1 floor. So we tried it. We explained the plan to my son, then 7, and that evening we went down to the 2nd floor. Usually calm during sirens, my son was visibly distressed. After we returned, he burst into tears, worried about Gray, his cat, who was still at home upstairs. That moment made it clear. The emotional toll on him outweighed the marginal safety gain. We decided to stay in our usual spot from then on. A couple of weeks into the war, I took it upon myself to clean out the building's long-neglected bomb shelter. It was mostly a distraction from the news, but after a week of work it was usable. Hezbollah hadn't yet begun targeting Tel Aviv, so we kept it as a backup. By mid-2024, Hezbollah began launching rockets into central Israel. Though at a pace less intense than feared, we did use the shelter a few times. My son, now 9, was more composed. This was a huge relief to us, but at the same time it saddened us that a 9-year-old kid is getting used to going down to a bomb shelter when his home is being targeted by rockets. Around the same time, Houthis joined in as well. After sounding threats and disrupting maritime traffic in Bab el-Mandeb, they started firing Iranian-made ballistic missiles at Israel. These were heavier than anything from Hamas or Hezbollah, but came in smaller barrages, making them easier to intercept. Also, the The range and type of missiles allowed Homefront the ability to provide one more step of early warning to civilians. Once a ballistic missile launch was detected, they would already have been engaged by naval vessels, ours as well as Americans, stationed along the Red Sea. If that didn't work, and as the missile advanced a few more seconds, there would already be an estimated impact area. We would then receive alerts on our smartphones about a missile launch detection, and a note that alerts are likely, but not positively, to be activated in about 5 minutes. This time would be spent by the air defense trying again to intercept the missile, typically by Arrow 2, Arrow 3 or American THAAD batteries that were deployed in Israel. Unless the incoming missile broke up on its own early on, which happens surprisingly often, the sirens and specific area alerts would usually start screaming even if an interception was successful. The reason is that the ballistic missile spends a portion of its travel outside the atmosphere, and even if successfully intercepted during that time, Arrow 3 does that exo-atmospheric intercept magic, several tons of metallic debris would continue their trajectory, re-enter the atmosphere and spread over a wide area. The 12 Days War, June 2025. Backing up again to the early days of the war. With the concern of the war escalating, we've tried thinking how we could better prepare for whatever contingency might occur. My wife and I have decided to prepare an emergency backpack. Should our home sustain any damage and we would be forced to leave it, we figured it would be good to have at least some basic items that would make things more manageable in the first day or two. A flashlight, extra charging batteries for our phones, some canned food, bottled water, clothing, etc. Preparing this backpack was logical, and it gave us a sense of control over things that were happening to us, however slim. This was crucial, and it was helpful sometimes to just behold this backpack sitting by the door for more than a year and a half. And fast forwarding back to June 2025, more specifically Friday, June 13th, around 3 AM. Now a family of 4, my daughter joined us in late November 2024, we were all jolted awake by sirens outside. Oddly, there were no prior alerts on our phones, something that always preceded sirens in our area. Moments later, all our devices lit up with a new kind of alert, accompanied by high-toned beep sounds from every device around the house. The message read, in rough translation, "Extreme alert. Attention to Homefront instructions. Due to an expected substantial threat, you are instructed to adhere to Homefront instructions being distributed at this time in the media." Now that didn't help calm us down. We felt that something major was happening, and we didn't even know what the hell it was. A few minutes later, we saw the local news telling us that a preemptive strike was currently being executed by Israel at Iran. Twice before that morning, we've experienced ballistic missile attacks from Iran. In both instances, there was some build-up of tension leading up to the actual Iranian strikes, so we were able to prepare both physically, but more importantly, mentally. This time, tension had been peaking for some days already. It was widely believed that something was going to happen in the coming days, and yet, being woken up by that siren coupled with the successive alerts on our phones, made for a very tough and tense morning. A few things we did in the minutes that followed. We decided that when a missile attack came, we would head down to our building's bomb shelter. We refreshed our emergency backpack with food and clothing, also for my daughter, the 6-month-old wonder who joined our lives. We've decided on some pre-planned steps that each of us would carry out to speed up our arrival at the shelter. From things like ensuring all the air conditioning units are off, to shutting off the gas line for the kitchen stove, to who would carry our daughter and how. This gave us all some sense of control over things. We also took our time talking to our son about what's going on, that there is some danger, but also that we can actively mitigate it drastically by following some simple rules. In the following hours of what was left of that night, we got the all-clear notification telling us we don't need to stay at a sheltered area just yet, but we should stay close to 1 up to 90 seconds away from a shelter. The media outlets highlighted that, unlike what was considered safe against the smaller rockets we were facing from Gaza and Lebanon, any alerts henceforth required us to go into an actual shelter or a mamad, apartment-hardened room. The warhead in the smaller rockets is largely based on fragmentation, which can usually be avoided by simply lying flat on the ground, even when outdoors. Iranian missiles carry 600 to 1,000 kilograms of explosive, generating a powerful shockwave. This shockwave is said to be deadly for anyone near it and can easily disintegrate any non-reinforced structures. We were also informed that due to this situation, schools and any non-critical workplace, i.e. anything other than food distribution, medical personnel, police, etc., would be closed until further notice. The news update stated that Iran has indeed launched a few hundred drones our way, that they were being tracked, but they were still hours away from us. Should they become a threat, the affected areas would be alerted well in advance. I took the opportunity to go outside and headed for a nearby public shelter a few minutes away from our home. That shelter turned out to be much more inviting than our building's old cave. The public shelter is a more modern facility, better protected, cleaner, with lights and air conditioning and even a Wi-Fi service. I took my time recording a video of how this shelter looks from street level, going downwards. When I arrived home, we showed it to my son so that he could be better prepared and feel more comfortable once he's visiting there. That evening, the first missile attack finally came. It started with a cellular alert instructing us to once again stay close to a shelter. We dressed up in a hurry, took our backpacks, took our daughter, and headed to the public shelter. Already on our way there, about 4 minutes away, the sirens started screaming. As we arrived at the bottom level of the shelter, we were able to hear and feel the dozens of explosions outside, some from interceptors self-destructing, some from interceptors killing enemy missiles, but also some from ground impacts. I've experienced some mortar fire and rockets falling not too far away from me, but the thundering sounds of these missiles came to me as a frightening experience. The shelter was pretty crammed with neighbours, and some started mentioning rumours and news flashes about impacts and damage. We quickly hissed those, asking politely but firmly to refrain from calling out such news to avoid stressing the kids even more. Thankfully this worked most of the time, but when I peeked at the news on my own smartphone, I was shocked to see photos of enormous columns of smoke and dust in places in Tel Aviv that I could easily recognise as not being 2.5 kilometres away from us. About an hour later, we were given the all clear, and we climbed back out to the street level. Something I would never forget from that moment is the stench of rocket exhaust fumes and explosive smoke. I suppose some of it came from dozens of Iron Dome interceptors launching from positions all around and inside of Tel Aviv. Some of it probably came from the Iranian warheads. The feeling of going with my wife and 2 kids out of a shelter into the street and smelling this stench is something that's hard to describe. The next 12 days looked quite the same. I was able to work from home, which helped me avoid climbing on the walls out of frustration. But we also stayed together as a family, which turned out to be a very reassuring period. In these 12 days we were in a constant alert state. We always had clothes and shoes nearby. We always kept thinking ahead about contingencies for the coming minutes. We kept our showers short and kept planning who would do what if an alert came just then. We had missile alerts sometimes 1, sometimes 3 times a day, and we always ensured our backpacks were back in 100% state as soon as we were back home, so that if yet another alert came, we would already be fully ready. The high pace of those 12 days made us well trained, and soon we were able to be at the shelter not 4 minutes after the initial warning. But the constant tension, coupled with the grim news of the situation in areas affected by missile impacts, and not knowing what's to come, all these took a heavy toll on all of us. By the time the small 12 days war came to an end, we were all but drained, physically and mentally. From the early days of the war and tenfold since the beginning of the 12 days war, we were all extra twitchy about sharp noises. A motorcycle speeding and buzzing in the street. A furniture drag screeching on the floor in another house in the street. An ambulance, each and any of those make us stop for a moment, which often feels like much more than that. Waiting, analysing, thinking, ensuring, and then exhaling in some relief that it is not that sound. In the following days I had a chance to go to 2 sites where Iranian missiles had landed, both in Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan on my way to work. The level of destruction seen on TV and in photos is enormous, but it's also nothing like seeing that devastation in person. Seeing what even a couple of missiles can do when impacting a city made me think how lucky we are to have all those fancy air defense systems. It also made me think of how truly heartbreaking and terrifying it must be for all those around the world experiencing a similar level of violence these days, but without those very same measures of protection. Some final words at last. This has become quite a wall of text. I really tried to organise and shorten it, but I just knew I wasn't very successful with that. The events starting and following October 7th are all one big mess in my head, with clusters of more dense, incomprehensible mess from some specific days. I sure hope I was able to at the very least convey some of the feelings and experiences. I also wish I could forget some of those and at the same time forever remember them. Most of all, I hope no civilians in the world would have to go through the experiences of war and armed conflict. We should all realise we have much better things on which to spend our time, expenses and effort. To all the fine friends here who constantly care, check in, show interest and offer their support, I cannot begin to describe how helpful your kind words are and the power they have. A thank you feels somewhat inadequate, but it is here nonetheless. The siren that alerts of incoming attacks is about to be played. If such a sound disturbs you, please close the video now.